inflection point indeed. Both the 1st and 12th Corps have gone inactive. And they've pulled back, and you can see a lot of straggler recovery. I've just completed movement and nothing further. Basically, they're largely out of range. I may move some of these, get just a little bit further back. Those guys are shaking anyway. There's no real reason to... these counters are a pain in the ass in this game. One of the problems with gamers stuff is everything's very slippery. Glossy counters, glossy maps. And this map is particularly poochy for whatever reason. I'm not sure why. Components to this one really are unpleasant for me in a lot of ways. It may be simply that the middle of the map is where all the action is, and it's not a multi-map game, so over here things are flatter. I tried to flatten it out. I backfolded it many times through my life. I've put some weight on it. But no matter what, it just doesn't seem to lie flat. And don't tell me about Plexi. I hate this stuff. But also the 5th Corps started moving, and you can see they've shifted their way over. I've kept the artillery up here. I'm planning on using that to provide some support fire. It looks like there's almost nothing in the way right now. Unless, who is this, McLaws, can get his ass in gear. It's going to be tough to defend the route to Sharpsburg at the very least. As we end the Union side of that turn, we'll go to the Confederates, but I'll pull back over here. Some of the forces rallied, obviously. Some engagement here, and then we got a new column coming in. You see all those strength point markers? It's because I play with an optional rule that when you're traveling in road movement down in column formation, you split into B-sized units for each segment of the road. So it stretches the column out and it makes it harder to deploy. You see the units do have a formation switch. They're on their back side. No routed sides in this game. You use the little R markers for that. For Cav, they also have essentially a column side. This is their mounted position if you're doing that. I have to be in column to cross the river here, because I have to cross the bridge. If there's any fords, like down here, I could use them in line formation. But where I am, I have to come across in column, and then I deploy in line to face the enemy. The Confederates could have moved up closer and made that a more painful process conceivably, but they're not deployed that way at the beginning, and they haven't expended any effort to do so. One thing to note, we paid a lot of McClellan points to activate another corps. We're up to 17. And we've only captured 3 points on the board so far. So we're not doing too well at this point. There are no points for wrecked formations in this game. In a lot of the games there are. And the casualties probably... Yeah, the Confederates pay more for casualties here. So actually the Union are probably ahead by a few victory points against the Confederates there. Well, yeah, I think the Confederates are above 30 at this point. And the Union is certainly under 70 still. The reason these games always record casualties as kind of the smaller army suffers worse from the casualties it takes, which makes sense in terms of the suffering of the army, but I'm not sure it really makes sense as a victory point status. If anything, the smaller army should probably have something skewed in their favor, but they never do. At least not in any of the ones that I can think of. Maybe some of the ones I haven't played yet. There's a few of the older ones I haven't done yet. Anyway, so we have this column. It's heading down to this vicinity, I believe, and then it's just going to camp out there until somebody gives it orders. It will be inactive, and is inactive right now, actually. All right, on to the Confederates, and, well, we know what we got to do. We got to get our troops here. I may keep Evans and not assign him any orders, and I may try to use Jackson on an initiative roll. Let me see what the sequence of play is, because it is actually important here. Sometimes it's not too important, but in the command phase, core attack stoppage happens before initiative order determination, so I'll have an opportunity that I wouldn't have with written orders. I don't know where Lee is, he's still down here. So I can not see if, I won't be able to see if this thing activates, actually. So yeah, I have to make my decision on what to do with Jones here before I see whether or not these start moving. I may try to send him into the gap too. There's a danger whenever you roll for initiative though, although not for Jackson and Longstreet. So if I just only do with them, I'm kind of safe. That danger is the loose cannon situation where basically my opponent would get to write a set of orders that lasts no longer than a turn, but it could, you know, send Jones marching off down to try to get into these woods or something where he's totally useless. Loose cannons are not an issue for Longstreet or Jackson, so I'm going to roll an initiative roll, say for Longstreet first. I'll decide if Jackson fails what I'm going to do. And it's just on this table. I need a 9 or better to succeed in writing some orders. And they can be any kind of orders at that point. But here's the problem. Jackson or Longstreet will then give those orders to Evans, and then Evans still has to accept them. If Evans rolled for an initiative on his own, he would risk a loose cannon roll, but he'd be rolling on just an 11, and he would get to immediately implement the orders. I don't want to take that risk, though. So I'm going to see. I do not get them. I'm going to take a shot with Jackson as well. I do get them. So now I get to write my orders for Jackson. Now these are countermanding the orders that Lee gave. Therefore, there's going to be a penalty on the acceptance roll. It's a column to the left if the receiver has orders of any type, but I think that may have changed in version 3, so I gotta look. That may be actually 2 columns now. So what I'm doing here is Jackson's written his orders, which are moved to defend around Newcomer's house, which is right here where D.H. Hill's forces are. I'm going to shift his forces over as somebody takes their place. Now, my total points for this are 4 for Jackson plus 2 for Jones. That gives me 6, plus 2 because it's an in-person verbal. That puts me to 8. Now, I don't have any rules for recharging Jackson. He's a special case. I'll just use the original rules from version 2.1 or whatever. So what are we at? 8. I'm doing force 1 here. Let's hold off there. But the reason for that is I want to be on this maximal column here. So I'm marking down a point. Once I get up to 16 of those, then every additional point will be an anti-initiative. So I think this is an important time to try to get a success, though. And it's going to be a simple order. So I'm on the 8 column, but I do only have 1 shift, as is noted here. The thing that confused me was it's bolded over here in the rules. And that led me to believe there was some reason to pay a special attention to it. I'm very good at remembering columns of text. I have a hard time once they stretch across the page. It's just harder to read them. And I have a hard time if there's lots of images and stuff. But when it's just columns of text, somehow it stays in my mind very well comparatively. And just one glance at these rules a little earlier, it stuck in my head that had been bolded. So I had to look it up. Okay, so now I'm not going to be on the 8 table. I'll be on the 6 to 7 table, and I quickly roll here. I get a 10, which is not necessarily good to roll high, but I get an accepted, which means I give myself a circle. That's how I indicate that an order is accepted. This order is now gone, and I'll just X that out to indicate that I shouldn't pay attention to it anymore. I wish I could just delete them. If I had it on a screen, I probably could. But yeah, so now Jones is going to be moving, and now I worry about McLaw's order, and he needs a 1 or a 2 to accept his order, and he doesn't get it. So he's still going to be dilly-dallying around. So it's very good that I sent a unit off that way. All right, well, we'll get them moving into place. Oh, this thing refills. I missed that, but otherwise, threw Jones into place down here. Hill shifted over and back a little bit, so he's no longer in small arms range here. I just don't want to take shots until I have something defending the line there effectively. I don't want to be fighting at a disadvantage. I also don't want to fire the artillery from up here, not during a Confederate turn. My hope during my own turn was, hey, maybe I can throw those units back a little bit, open up the gap so that I can push forward on my next turn, because the Confederates won't necessarily want to come forward if I disorder a unit or something. They really don't want to come under fire. But at this point, there's very little to gain by opening fire. There might be a reason once I engage to give support to some of the small arms fire, and I did that last time too. Over here, the Confederates are beginning to see their units showing back up on the map. Now, these are just, 1 strength point each, but, well, it serves some purpose, I guess. It's hard for me to get my stragglers back in general because my lines are too close everywhere. Oh, that shaking is gone too. It's going to come off the map. And yes, I use the tweezers here. They're almost necessary just because of the poochiness of the map. I don't want to put any pressure on. You put a little pressure on, pop, everything jumps up. Well, Porter's 5th Corps begins to engage, and they brush back the one Confederate unit that was directly in their way, but now there's a line forming. It isn't that impressive a line, though. If you look under all of those, I've had to put little B markers. The Confederate Army is tiny. It really is when you look in comparison. I mean, that is a 3-to-1 advantage, but what it means is there's a lot of little battered Confederate units, whereas the Union Army has received enough reinforcements, etc., to be up to what looks like a full-strength army. I gotta look at Evans's units. I may have, yeah, those are little too. I'm gonna have to put a B and a C under those. There's just not a lot of force there. There's not a lot of force anywhere. This is stretched out. Everybody's an extended line, and they were A-sized units. These guys coming in, they're largely B-sized units streaming in. There just isn't a lot of army there. What the Confederates have is a defensive posture and pretty good terrain. And McClellan. Because if you could bring this force into play, any decent proportion of it at once, this would be pretty impressive. Right now I've got 1 corps moving. This corps doesn't count. And I did move McClellan over to try to get Burnside's on the move. We'll see. The rebels begin to piece together a pretty decent line to face that, and engaging in some long-range dueling, they pulled back a little bit. This artillery piece here I didn't notice before, and it had an exposed fire on some limbered guns that were moving forward. This is always something I'm kind of iffy about, but in this case I let them have the shot. If I was playing an opposed game, obviously I would, but so many times when I play either, not so much in this, but in a minis game, somebody stretches out some attack that I didn't think was possible. And I mean, the truth is troops do stumble into bad situations every now and then. So sometimes I try to avoid making really stupid mistakes, and I'll backtrack a little bit like that. But something like this, I think, that's just the vagaries of war. It depends on my mood here, I guess, more than anything. We got... yeah, I forgot to mention McClellan went over to go talk to Burnside's here too. Confederates not getting these troops moving. Over here, with the Union, I pulled back behind the gun line, figuring the Confederates aren't going to attack, and if they do, my artillery is going to massacre them. The Confederates don't have that liberty. They've got to keep troops in the line because, well, I could roll an initiative with one of these units and go storming and just take that line down if it was only guns, using close assault, because guns aren't going to hold up as well. So it's a little, well, I don't know, most of that stuff's wrecked, so it's probably safe enough. But it's a little harder for the Confederates to figure out what they're going to do with their units for straggling. So they actually intermingled their commands kind of ugly ways to get the units that have straggler recovery potential towards the back, and the units that don't, and some of which are very, very weak, are right on the front line. But they're providing a little extra defense for the artillery at this point. The Union, though, was able to just pull back and say, well, I'm influencing your ability to straggle recovery, but mine's fine because I'm behind my guns. My overall knowledge of the weakness of the Confederate line convinced me to launch close attacks along here. I think I made 2. Neither one was terribly successful. One resulted in a disorganized unit. It's now just shaken after recovery. But it's a painful process when you charge in and you're not bloodlusted, because chances are you are going to get thrown back, and then if you're disorganized, you're going to take defensive fire immediately afterwards and get pushed back some more, and that's what happened here. It's an unpleasant thing to have happen. I again put a gun out there and attracted some Confederate fire. This time I did it willingly. It's basically a, you know what? Yeah, they can shoot it. I'm not going to get my cannons up there. If I have to screen them, they're not doing me any good up here. I think I know why the 5th Corps costs more. It's not because it's big. It's not a particularly large unit. It's not because it's particularly good or anything. It's because it occupied a central location in McClellan's line, and that by giving that up, he's basically given up his entire defensive bulwark here. As long as that's holding the line up on those hills, there's almost no chance the Confederates could do some sort of counterattack. That's why it costs a little more to commit it. Sent some orders, or walked over to Burnside's last turn, wrote him some orders. He's in D2, which isn't too bad given that I used no force and stuff like that. I don't want to end up with anti-initiatives early in the battle, and it's still pretty early. Recovery, well, the Union 1st and 12th Corps are beginning to come together. You can see the line moving down there. There's not a lot of space on this map, so unlike the 7 days stuff, I feel like almost any movement is significant on this. A little one-mapper like this is very crowded for the series. But it's still not moving here with McLaws. Longstreet's gone down to give orders to Anderson, try to fling him in a little more quickly. We get the cav positioned here. There had been a disordered unit here, and that got shot out of the space. It's back here now. But a massive firing on the 315 caused a couple of casualties to it. There's a couple of artillery pieces under Evans's units there, which are doing some pretty devastating work. Knocked everyone out of supply. The unit under Evans is still low ammo, but I had moved the army supply wagon up there, and it just happened to be able to catch a couple of the units. It doesn't have a strength point value on it. Over here we see another unit got pushed back. The line's beginning to become shakier and shakier. I have to worry because I don't want to leave the sunken road part exposed there. But I also kind of want to defend Sharpsburg, and I'm just running out of troops. There wasn't much there to begin with. One thing that's interesting about after having seen how the RSS handles the artillery, you kind of feel like the low ammo rules for artillery, they are affected by it the same way infantry are in RSS. After looking at South Mountain, that might apply well to CWB. I'm kind of interested in seeing what they do with LOB. See what lessons they learned, etc. But I'm still waiting on a game that covers something I really want to see in depth. So far, it's always been the big battles, and I'm just waiting for something like South Mountain, one of these smaller battles that I think are more applicable to the RSS. Doing something like Antietam or Chickamauga. Yeah, I already have one of them anyway. All right. We are moving into the 10:30 turn, and not a lot more to say. News for the Union. Burnside's decided to take a little walk-off map. That means I started to move the 9th Corps coming across. At the same time, the 5th Corps is really brushing aside what little Jones's division is. It looks like a big division when it's on the map, but the reality is there's nothing there. And I've got the same problem with McLaws that I'm looking at throwing into play. There's nothing there. I don't know how I'm going to stop the 5th Corps. We're just going to have to hope that it runs down on its own, because it doesn't have a lot of damage on it, and it's not likely to get knocked into erect status very easily unless it does something stupid like attacking the sunken road. The sunken road is going to be an interesting situation, I think, because my plan with the Union might be to strike up with either the 5th or 9th, which are going to be in place down in Sharpsburg. So if the 5th does what it's supposed to, swings up here and then marches back to Sharpsburg, all without any problems, both it and the 9th are sitting here. The Confederates are going to have a tough time getting them out of there. And it's quite possible I could send a corps, maybe one of them, or maybe the 2nd here, to assault the sunken road at the same time that I send the 6th in. I'm not sure how I'm going to do this precisely, but I can see where where it might devolve in a situation where the Confederates have a little line here on the sunken road. Don't really want to give it up because it's the best terrain in the game. On the other hand, it'll look like a hopeless position that they'll have to try to fight their way out of, or else just sit there and die. Neither of which is very appealing. There just aren't a lot of Confederate troops left, though. I mean, you look at D.H. Hill's division, too, holding the road, and it's spread out pretty thin. It's not bad units, but what do we got? Rhodes has just dropped down. Remember, almost all of these are stretched, so he's now C-level units holding it. These others are all Bs. That's just not enough to defend it there, and almost everything that's been engaged is in a lot of trouble. When do I get A.P. Hill? Way back here. He's not a terribly, well, he's not very big either. Yeah, this Confederate Army's pretty hosed before this battle. Longstreet wasn't able to get initiative and get his orders in play. I'm kind of pulling these guns back from the 9th Corps. I don't think I can fight a battle up there, and I'm hoping, well, see, one of the problems is I don't have Walker. If Walker was right up at the river, he could cause some serious problems for the Union trying to cross, but he's not there, and, well, I didn't take the risk on an initiative check to throw him up there. Now, under the rules as they stand, this unit essentially is stuck here. He has to leave a unit there. He has to leave Walker there. I don't like that at all. So I'll probably cheat the rules a little bit and let him move up and defend the streamline. But he certainly doesn't have enough latitude to his orders to run all his units up to the lower bridge. The problem is, though, that because of the screwed up command system for the Confederates, the actual rules say I have to leave this unit right here. I cannot move Walker one bit. And it's one of the things I really do not like about the early war battles, at least in the East. I don't remember Shiloh having this issue. It's that, at least the Confederate command is just so screwed up that you can't position your units at all reasonably. You can't do anything reasonable. And, I'm willing to fudge it, but for a newer player, I wouldn't, want to put that burden on them along with the rest of the new orders. Got the Confederates kind of trying to do what they can in terms of curving their position. And here again, you can't fall back under these command rules. Now, in the old system, and I'm by allowing my units to fall back, in a sense, I'm cheating for the Confederates. But here's the thing. If it was the standard corps system for command, there's a lot of latitude to falling back, but there's one problem. There's eventually a time when you hit that core center. And if that gets hit, if the enemy crosses that, you have an emergency core retreat. And there's no way to symbolize that with the kind of rules that are in place for this disoriented command. Lee couldn't have done as well as he did if he was facing the rules as this game and all these earlier games of the series. Not earlier in terms of the rule books, but earlier in terms of the war, have chosen to represent the command problems for the Confederates. They're just too extreme. I mean, basically, yeah, you're bolted down and you can't do anything, and you've got to keep one unit garrisoning your headquarters, as it were, at all times. All right. Well, anyway, by bending the rules a little bit, I've got this kind of somewhat defensive position here. Otherwise, Jones was up here somewhere. He wouldn't be allowed to move. But if he gets retreated, then the rest of his unit will follow him. All feels very artificial when you play with these rules. And that's the game that it first really struck me as, these suck, was the 3 Battles of Manassas one. I got that over here somewhere. Down there, next to For the People. Because you had units all over the place covering large amounts of area, and honestly they couldn't do it because they didn't have the capability. I remember this one always displeasing me because of the effect of it, and now that I'm aware of what it is that's wrong, I'm kind of on a crusade against it, I guess, because I really do love most of the CWB, but this one has never really caught my fancy, and I'm seeing that this element, although not as devastating as it is to the game in the 3 Battles of Manassas, is still painful, and it's also somewhat painful over in the 7 Days battles, the 3 there, Gaines Mill, Seven Pines, Malvern Hill. Combination of the McClellan points in my orders, swing down here, then up this way, up the Hagerstown Pike, whatever. And the Confederate placement here is creating a situation that I'm not used to seeing in a CWB game, or really much of anything, which is the 5th Corps is just kind of unsupported, marching its way through. It's able to cut through the Confederate line like butter. It doesn't have the option to stop attacking because it's like exposing itself. I'm unlimbering some guns to try to help cover my flanks here. But this is really a weird situation. I don't think I've ever done something like this in this game before. Meanwhile, got this big clump recovering here. I've got it marked there. Everything gets to straggle recover except for this disorganized unit, which should have actually gone down to Shaken last turn. And the 6th Corps has moved into place here. After a turn of resting and having a nice smoke, McClellan has decided, I don't know if he smoked actually, has decided, everybody did, right? But McClellan's kind of weird. He's Mr. Clean in a lot of ways. He's decided to go have a chat with the 6th Corps commander. This guy's not bad. 3 rating. My plan there was to cut around in this direction and just add lots of pressure on the line here. These guys are almost like a wall and go. They're in a very strong position. The Confederates aren't going to get any kind of movement in that direction. And rather than try to move them, which I really don't want to do, they're wrecked. I think the 1st Corps is actually... No, they're not that bad. 1 division's wrecked there. The 12th Corps is not in good shape. But I could get the 1st Corps moving again, I think. But they serve a nice purpose here where they're able to recover their strength and still supply a supporting effect just by their proximity to wherever the line is. So I don't just want to slide through them and attack from that direction with the 6th Corps. I want to make some kind of flanking maneuver. Now, a maneuver against the road directly, I know how ugly the road is. I'm terrified of it. But I know this has already been chewed up and I can hit it. Now, what I don't know is how weak Hill's command is up there. But I should know it, right? Anyway. The 5th Corps is funny. And the 9th is beginning to push its way across. You can see I've got some units in the back still in column formation on the road. Over here we're in column, but we're not using road movement anymore. So the whole column is together. It's in kind of like a Napoleonic attack column or whatever. You don't want to fight in that formation, but you will get chewed up in this era. But it allows for some quicker movement, etc., but it doesn't stretch out the way the road movements do. The 9th is able to go quite far, actually. This is, I think, 2 movement points, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I could have divisions centered up around here where the fighting might be. And there's nothing to stop them, and in fact, they can't even suffer a core attack stoppage check. Of course, each turn there's a chance that Burnsides comes in. This turn he only had a 1 in 6, but it increases each turn. So, you know, he's not going to be able to be in the special status for very long, and it's not going to have much effect. I don't know if this Confederate gun started here, but this is a terrible location. These hills here, because of the way the line of sight works, where this is kind of considered one hillock, and it's sloping up and then down and up and then down. The fact that I have nothing behind me like a hill and things ahead of me that are the same elevation and then it drops down means I can't see these units. Now I was able to pluck this guy off here. Confederate fire has been very, very fierce at this point now. You can see some disordered, but a lot of casualties were caused, like 6 casualties or something. 600 men fell in this attack so far. But now the Union gets to fire back. We've got a bloodlusted guy. That could be problems if he remains in that state till the next Union turn. Because, well, that's time to fix bayonets quite often. At the beginning of the 11:30 turn, I don't think I said anything about the Confederate turn. There wasn't much to say. They're just falling back. McClellan issued orders in person verbal to Franklin. Unfortunately, I got a low roll here and got a DT. That's not like a loose cannon. It just means Franklin decides he doesn't want to understand whatever the hell is going on. You know, I thought you meant tomorrow. Under the 3.0 rules, since this was an in-person verbal, McClellan's got to go back to his headquarters, rest there for a turn before he comes back and says, hey, yo, dude, what the fuck? Weren't you supposed to move somewhere? Or he could send written orders. They need not be the same orders. These are just as if no orders were given at all. Burnsides didn't activate, and I'm using a little number marker in there to indicate what the last number rolled was. So he's just continuing moving forward because he has this time limit. That cost me McClellan point to give the order. Otherwise, I'm not spending a lot. I only have 1 corps officially moving right now, the 5th, and I'd really like to get some more going. The 9th Corps taking up its position along here, we're beginning to see what looks like a more reasonable supported formation for the 5th Corps. It's also been sliding kind of in this direction away from these. And now we're seeing something kind of scary for the Confederates. Like I said, these guys are looking like they're going to get cut off. If I can't throw a couple of these units into the line there, things are going to be really ugly. And as of right now, that's just not been happening. I may even... So here's another thing that's kind of iffy in the rolls. You can't roll for initiative for orders you have pending. You can't try to extend them that way. But one thing you can do is, oh my God, they're breaking through here. These guys could try to roll for an initiative to get to here, while these guys take an initiative to go to here if they're not going to accept their orders yet. What's the danger? Well, I think the sequence of play doesn't really help you with that. But basically, it gives you if you're really intent on getting things going, you do the initiative before the delay reduction. So that could cancel the pending order, but you have more of a chance of getting something reasonable that way. Feels a little fuzzy to me in terms of like maybe a little cheap, but on the other hand, you know, yo, they're breaking through here, do something. Or are you like Stonewall? I don't know. I didn't say that. We reached just about what I think is the halfway mark, the noon point. Although, we'll see. The Confederate McLaws, I didn't do any kind of tricky stuff, you know. I figure I got a 1/3 chance in each case of bringing something into play. Not to screw with it. I did try, again, I'm trying to bring Hood down there to help fill in the gap there, because I've got too much of my force committed up here, even if it's kind of weak. But nothing's happening there. Well, I should throw them in where there's some use. Anyway, McLaws did come in, and immediately one of his bigger units, 2B, stacked together, got driven back en route. Some heavy straggling losses at the very least. We can take a look. That's the only one. Barksdale got shot up pretty bad. Good unit too, but anyway. Otherwise, though, we did manage to bash some of the 5th Corps back. They're looking pretty iffy at this point. I got only 1 wrecked division out of 2, but if you look, the losses on that 2nd unwrecked division, Sykes' unit, and Sykes himself has been wounded, is, for some reason, I have him, he got popped by the map. Fairly regular occurrence. His replacement is just as good. But anyway, that's kind of petering out over there, which means it may be up to Burnsides. By the time he finally gets moving, Sykes will probably be done, and Burnsides is just going only as far as Sharpsburg. He's not doing what the 5th Corps was planning, this kind of attack to the rear of the position there. It is looking kind of weird, though, for the Confederates, I'd say. Like, they're in serious danger of getting cut off if the 5th Corps keeps moving. But I think it's gonna start. It's got serious checks on the Corps attack stoppage at this point. And meanwhile, hey, no reason I can't. I forgot about this, but no reason I can't move Franklin back to Army headquarters to question McClellan. Yeah, what exactly did you mean? Are you sure you mean today? I don't know. Anyway, let's do some more turns on this video. Yeah, I'm going to give McClellan an aneurysm here. Total points on the board are 6, 7 more for the road is 13, 26, 31, 36 points, and I just chucked him up to 21. Spent 2 points issuing orders to both the 6th and 2nd Corps. The 6th Corps, same orders as before, swing around, hit through the sunken road, but this time drop down to Sharpsburg after they succeed in clearing through. 2nd Corps hit the sunken road this way if need be, clear out this nest, and then swing down to Blackford's Ford. That would be running the table, essentially. The reason I'm willing to do all this is in part because I think the 5th Corps is going to stall. I don't think they're going to make it through, but they're going to be able to pull back and be in a position to threaten where the Confederates are. I just think they're pretty hosed right now. The 9th Corps has a limited move to get to Sharpsburg, right? I didn't write, yeah. They're not going very far, so they'll be positioning themselves here if they manage to cut through, and it looks likely that they will. Very soon I'm not going to have any corps moving. So that's my feeling there. Now, there's a limitation on how many orders you can write on a leader, but it's fairly liberal here. So McClellan has 15 points. Because I don't want to develop those anti-initiatives still, maybe ever, I'm doing these in-person, verbal, complex Force 0, well, in-person verbal cost me 2 points each. The Force 0 doesn't cost anything complex, puts it to 3. So I spent 5 points on each order. I still got room with even a 0 leader to give another leader that kind of complex order. That's just to give you an idea of how intense you can make a set of orders be. So you have a lot of flexibility to write orders if you want to, especially with decent leaders like Lee. He can usually write a couple of Force 2 orders if you're playing with the version 2 or earlier rolls. With version 3, though, you really don't want to use Force if you can help it. All right, let's roll some of these out. I don't know what the sequence of play is. I always kind of cheat it. So the first thing I know is going to be checking, I shouldn't have even written those, checking the 5th core to see if it fails. 5th core's got one rec division out of 2, which is going to put it on the 2 chart. Porter's in command, he's a 3 leader. So I'm going to need a 5 or higher to succeed. And I get that, I get to keep going. See about Burnsides, I don't know when I'm supposed to check him. This is 3rd turn. He's on the map. All right. That means I'm spending yet another McClellan point because I've got 2 active core now. I don't have to check for a failure yet, I don't think. Who knows? It's not really spelled out. Now for acceptance of those orders, let's take a look. Franklin's a 3 leader. McClellan's, of course, is 0. So that gets me a 3, 4, 5 for in-person verbal. 4, 3, 2. That's where I was before. Let's see what we get. A 4. That's going to be a D2. So he wants to think about that order for a while. And then French, I think, is only a 2 leader. Yeah. So he's on the 0 to 1 chart, huh? I probably should have used some force with him, but I don't really care. And he too gets a D2. I just don't want to get the DTs because normally they're not that bad a thing. I mean, they're not much worse than a D2 because you can just write the order again and again and again. But McClellan, you know, he doesn't want to do that much work. All right, and I think we're in place to start moving. It's a recovery turn, so I've already thrown this down just to remind me to recover. Whatever's left there, mostly it's been done. I got some stuff here I got some significant recovery to do, actually. It's going to be a long time before those units want to move. Shit, French shouldn't have been in command there. Sumner is the corps commander. It would have been on the same table, though. It's just a 1 point difference. I was at the 1. It would have been on the 0. So we'll leave it as is. Ninth Corps is clearing up some of the problems that are kind of hindering its attempt to move towards Sharpsburg. They could slide through, but I believe that you have to kind of handle your flanks and that you're allowed to, where possible. Where the 5th Corps was going, their orders were just so crazy that they did what they could, expecting some support at some point. One thing I love about this system is, wow, this routed unit up here. It's just the sign of the deterioration of the units, and they go fast. Once they hit wrecked status, their ability to stay in combat, even long-range artillery duels, becomes very weak. You kind of want to get the infantry off there because they're going to make the guns run. But on the other hand, you might lose your guns if you don't have infantry garrisoning it. All right, on to the Confederate side, as we didn't get a lot of recuperation here. Well, not a lot of change here. A little bit of straggler recovery, but mainly we're just, exchanging fire. No big breaks in the line. I really should be getting Walker out of there. I don't feel like I can do that without doing a emergency retreat, though. I feel like his orders are to defend this area, and if he abandons that, the problem is he's got an out of ammo unit, and if I don't pull back, I'm trading shots at bad odds there, and that's what's been happening. at least in the last couple firing opportunities. I'm going to send this one up. I think it's gotten long enough.